Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Doug, and I'm one of the hosts of Good Suffering, along with my good friend Lorenzo. On this show, we review horror films that I've seen and he hasn't. But before we do that, we normally have a pre-show where we go over some horror news. Though that segment was supposed to be in this episode, technical difficulties made the recording nearly unlistenable. Like, literally, it was silent. We couldn't find the time to come together to record, and we both agreed that doing so would lack the magic of a fresh recording, but we didn't want to deprive our listeners of the news we think is important. That's why I'll be briefly giving you this segment solo this week. Don't worry, Lorenzo is still in the discussion portion, which actually is my favorite of all the episodes we've done so far. So stick around for that, but here's some horror news. Fede Alvarez, in the wake of the cancellation of Ash vs. the Evil Dead, tweeted out a poll that said, what would you rather me make? And it had Don't Breathe 2, Evil Dead 2, and then Stop Making Movies on it. And Evil Dead 2 won by 70%. And this is surrounded by a little bit of chatter about Evil Dead 2, fan-made trailers that have come out recently, and some other people involved with the production tweeting about a certain eagerness to do it. So it looks really hopeful. Also, in a high-quality photo of the original Predator costume that Jean-Claude Van Damme wore in the production of the original came out, and it's a horrendous-looking costume. It's really interesting. I'm going to link it in the show notes. It looks clunky. It looks bad. It looks like an ant person. It's not fantastic, but it gives an interesting glimpse into what could have been. Next up, it's not fair if we give you some Predator news without some Alien news. And the Alien news is a little more positive. They are actually coming out with a book that retells the original Alien, Ridley Scott's, film, from the perspective of the cat that was on board, Jonesy. And this is really cool. It's a really interesting new thing. I'm personally really excited to read it, and I've seen a lot of love for Jonesy lately, with Mondo putting out t-shirts, and I've found people making mock-up posters and stuff online. There seems to be a little bit of genuine love for this little cat that's got 2 or 3 minutes of screen time. Next maybe is the news that I'm most excited about, which is that FX has ordered 10 episodes of a What We Do in the Shadows series. What We Do in the Shadows is a fantastic movie if you haven't seen it. It's the only movie that I found so funny that I had to immediately rewatch it because I was laughing too hard at the jokes and I missed some. Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement, who are the basically leading brains of What We Do in the Shadows. They both have experience with episodic and television stuff through Flight of the Conchords. So I'm really hopeful, and I'm excited to see where they go, and if they're going to be in it, or it's going to be different vampires or something else. I'm really excited. And last but not least, I would just like to get the signal out there that Tremors 5, A Cold Day in Hell, Tremors in the Snow, is on Netflix streaming right now for free, and you should definitely check it out because giant monsters are awesome. And we love giant monsters here at Good Suffering. But thanks again for bearing with me. I just wanted to give you the news real quick. Enjoy the discussion, and we will make sure that we are on top of all technical issues from this point forward. Thank you, guys.
So today we're talking about Tobe Hooper's 1974 film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It was shot in 16 millimeter. It's a huge moment in horror, incredibly influential film. It joins the ranks of Psycho and Silence of the Lambs of being directly inspired by serial killer Ed Gein. But first off, what is this movie about?
All right, I'm going to go ahead and read the IMDb synopsis here. Let me tell you what that says. I'm going to tell you what I think of it. 2 siblings and 3 of their friends en route to visit their grandfather's grave in Texas end up falling victim to a family of cannibalistic psychopaths. That's putting it pretty cleanly.
Yeah. Almost makes it sound a little almost Hollywood.
Yeah, that's why I don't like it necessarily. I mean, it really is, but I guess in a sense that's what it's about. It's about a bunch of friends on a road trip, basically. They pick up a hitchhiker, which is never really a good idea in my book, or at least not in a horror movie. And yeah, it kind of it begins there. That's really where the mayhem begins, and it's a slow burner up until like halfway point when they meet those psychopaths, as they put it.
Specifically, one of them more than the others.
One more than the other.
Yeah, this film was made with a shoestring crew in some pretty bad conditions. It's like very much the classic idea of the indie movie. You know, it's gritty, it's hot. You know, the movie looks smelly.
It does. It looks hot.
It's brutal. It's just
it
brutal.
looks like it's,
and I think it took a lot of the aesthetics of like Herschel Gordon Lewis's films, especially 10,000 Maniacs, and really amplified them and pushed the horror in a huge way, and definitely changed the landscape. Even like as soon as like 6 years after Night of the Living Dead did that, and it was really interesting. But what'd you think of it?
Okay.
I've been waiting. I've been waiting 2 weeks for this.
Yes, I've been waiting to tell you. I've been leaving you in suspense, basically saying expect the unexpected. Going into this movie, I just was like not ready for it. I love slasher films. I think I mentioned that here. But I knew this was maybe on a different level because
it's like proto slasher. A lot of what you see in later slasher films, like the '80s slasher cycle, comes from this. You know, the mask and the power tools and the systematic like hunting down and the territorialness, like Freddy with his dreams or Jason with the camp.
Right.
A lot of that comes
exactly.
from there.
And the constant chase, like the just ever living chase. Just
yeah.
But yeah, so well, I guess to put it just right out there, I thought this was just a really amazing movie, just all out amazing. I wasn't expecting it to be so beautiful. Cinematography, like the cinematography is like amazing. It's
in its brutality, it's amazing. It's definitely, it doesn't let up, but it's just gorgeous. Like,
well, no, I mean not even that. Like there was one moment like where there's a lot of good pans on there. You know, a lot of good panning from like left to right. Or
I have something to say about that later.
Right. And there's like just amazing framing of like low angle shots, tracking shots, a lot of great tracking shots. But you don't get any of that in the beginning. At least not that I really found. So when I'm first, in the first few minutes of it, especially even when they do pick up, what's his name? The hitchhiker.
The hitchhiker. Yeah. I just refer to him as that.
Yeah. When they pick him up, that scene itself wasn't necessarily like, there's no beauty to it. There just seemed like it's utilitarian. Like they're filming it and then that's it.
That straightaway shot of him in the back of the van though is great. I really just like him like looking up at them and the camera's like, like
it's
on,
just,
on level with his face,
Yeah.
but he's looking up at everybody, he cuts his hand, he does all of that. It's great.
But it was to the point. There was nothing really like flashy about it. And then that's when I was starting to think, I was like, you know what, the cinematography is good. It seems almost accidental, but it's definitely planned. Like there is some kind of interest in framing something beautifully. I keep saying beautiful, but it really was. And then as the movie keeps going, like the light work, like when we first see the house, when we first see the door open, everything's dark and everything's like dimly being backlit from the sign light outside. It looked like a low budget version of like a Roger Deakins shot. But yeah, no, I was truly surprised by how much I enjoyed this movie.
Yeah. I actually to add to that, when the first girl goes and she looks through the house.
Right.
I think a lot of the angles used there they remind me of like a psychedelic movie from the 60s.
Yeah.
And they're perverted around those images of the bones and the skulls and all the weird furniture that's made with that. And I think that really is like a great way to take those like old angles and those old camera movements and really apply them to horror. And it makes sense because Tobe Hooper is basically a hippie, and this is kind of a hippie film too. There's like a hippie horror movie.
Yeah.
And, his first film, Eggshells, is like straight away like a movie about hippies. It's like a hippie fantasy film.
Not horror though.
No, it's not a horror film at all.
It's getting murdered
but,
like that.
Ironically, the opening shot of Eggshells is like nearly identical to the final shot of it's not the final shot of Texas, but the shot of her driving away. looking out the back of the truck bed.
Like we just see
and
like
laughing.
Leatherface. Oh, of her,
No, of her
in the
laughing,
truck.
yeah,
Okay,
when it's
yeah.
on her. But it's great contextually because at the beginning of Eggshells, it's supposed to be like, look how good a time they're having. But at the
Yeah.
end of Texas, it's the same shot, but it's like, look at this damage that's on her. She's laughing because she got away, but there's something in that laugh. There's something in her that's so sinister. Like she's left with those scars that
Yeah.
are worse than the bodies that are left around
Oh
the
my
house.
God. Yeah. That's another thing about this. The brutality of it. You don't really see that much like the chainsaw going into anyone.
You don't see it.
You
And
don't-
a lot of
right.
people think you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people think this movie's a lot more gory and brutal than it is.
I thought this was gonna be like the grandfather
Like
of like
Jason
Saw
level
or
of,
something,
like-
or other slasher films like that, But yeah, I mean, I don't know, a chainsaw, like I feel like that's a great tool to use to just hack people up, and you don't see it.
Yeah.
It's a lot more psychological than I was expecting.
It's the film is also pretty like proto found footage, almost. The way it's shot feels very documentarian, and
Yeah.
it's very like roaming, and it was sold as if it was real. Even like the scroll at the beginning, this is a tragedy that befell a group of youths.
Right, and the
That whole
radio.
thing. Yeah. Oh my God, the horrible news just one after the other. It plays.
Yeah.
It plays even as they're talking. It's just in the background, like all this bad news after bad news after bad news. Really sets a tone, and it gets to a point where it's almost funny.
It was.
It's almost like, oh my God, how worse can they get? Oh, they found a 3-year-old chained up in an attic. Like it just
Right.
like, it's like one upping themselves as like the movie is actually playing out. And I think that's a big thing with this movie that a lot of people even saw at the time, is that it blurs the lines between the horrific and the hilarious. And it really, like, depending on just like how much humor you have in you during the day, you can go, oh my God, this is horrible, or oh my God, this is fucking funny.
So yeah, I mean, you kind of touched briefly, like we don't talk about the movies before, which I was itching to.
Yeah.
But a little snippet slid out. You said that there is some kind of humor.
Oh yeah,
in this movie.
it's unintentional, but it is so there. And Tobe Hooper really saw it, and a lot of the people on the set saw it, and that's why they lean so much towards humor in the sequel.
Okay. Well, where is the humor
It's
here?
it's in all of it. It's in just the screaming and Sally, and
Yeah.
like even at the end, like you could just take it as funny. You know what I mean? It's and even like when it's so tense in that van when they have the hitchhiker and he's cutting himself and he's like, oh, the picture, and he's talking about the head cheese and all that. And in the background, there's a song playing, and like the lyrics are like sitting in the sidewalk, drinking coffee, watching women all day. It's just like there's like all this like humor to undercut it that makes it like really, like sometimes I watch this movie and I laugh, and sometimes I just really get engaged in like the violence and like the it's so dark it's funny. It's like ultra black humor.
Yeah. Well, I had something in mind for some of the humor. It's slipping me now, but maybe I'll think of it later. But what is it? The brother's name, Franklin. I was a little confused by him because they called him an invalid.
Yeah, he's like a paraplegic.
Yeah, and then I guess I was confused in the context of the story. I was like, why would they bring this poor guy out on this trip when they're gonna leave him like that? Like they just literally all abandon him once they get to the house.
If you notice, like there's kind of a theme running through this whole movie of like the rejection of either the mentally ill or like the physically handicapped.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll get into that more when I talk about how fucking communist this movie is.
Yes, I'm eager to talk about that.
But yeah, you see, like Franklin is definitely annoying. Franklin is definitely not a likable character, but there is a sympathy with him, and you see, like he's like nobody wants to hang out with him. They all think he's annoying, and he can't. It seems to like not have friends there, and he's kind of only there because he's her brother.
Right.
So
That's where I was like stuck. I was trying to figure out like, am I supposed to have sympathy for him? Because I do. I have sympathy for him because they are just like leaving him. He's playing around with this knife the whole time. He gets cut by like the razor blade.
Yeah, and they still make fun of him after that. He's the only one who's really affected by that guy. And
Yeah,
they're
like,
still
they're gonna get
we
you.
gave him your name and where you live.
Yeah, we give him a zip code.
And towards when it's just Sally and Franklin left, and they start to argue and they're getting on each other's nerves and they're going through the woods. Right. Tobe Hooper actually stoked that kind of like anger between them in real life by like basically going to one or the other saying like, oh hey, he said this about you, she said this about you, and it wasn't true. Just to like get them angry at each other to feel that scene.
Manipulate the directors, man. People always want to make jokes about actors, but directors, I don't know what's up their butts trying to always manipulate their actors. It's acting.
Scene, man.
It's acting. Let them act. But yeah, no, I mean that scene was very tense. I think that those kinds of scenes are always like the most tense for me. Is like when, shit's hitting the fan, like some maniac is trying to kill you, paranormal stuff is happening, whatever. But like when there's like internal fighting, like between the survivors, let's say, right? That's what always scares me the most. Because you don't want to be divided in a time like that. Mm-hmm. So like as a viewer, I'm like, just settle your differences, figure this out, get out of there and survive.
Right.
But so I really like that scene a lot.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I guess let's start talking about the commie stuff in this film that I at least see.
Yeah, enlighten me.
I it sets it up in that opening newsreel when they're showing the corpse totem.
Right.
And there's a line that's like saying like, oh, police think there's links outside of the state to that, to like the defamation of the graveyard.
Yeah.
And that sets up this tone that's followed through with the fact that they make mention to the meat packing plant or the slaughterhouse being shut down.
Right.
Where it's just like you look at the family, Leatherface's family, and their technology has replaced their jobs because they were all worked at that, the slaughterhouse.
Because of the air gun. They said that took away jobs.
The No Country for Old Men type.
Yeah,
that's what they're talking about. What I thought of. Yeah. They've got this like shitty, worn down house. They're very territorial over it. I mean, the only reason any of them get killed is because they're kind of trespassing, and even Leatherface looks very scared. After the second girl, he looks out the window and he sits down and
he got his head in his hands.
Yeah, he's like, who are these people? Where are they coming from? He's just protecting his place.
And then
it gives you a lot of sympathy for him.
Yeah, that was something like I noticed, and I guess anyone watching noticed, but it felt to me, I was like looking in, like peeking in at the psyche of Leatherface. I'm like, okay, maybe he doesn't want to be doing what he's doing right now.
No, yeah.
And then later on, I guess in a way you kind of do get that sympathy for him. You do realize that this isn't necessarily what he's set out to do. This is more of like the old man's.
Yeah, absolutely. They turned to cannibalism. I don't think they were always cannibals. I think that they were turned towards that because of like the desperation of not having jobs or anything. In analyses of this film, it's normally agreed upon that the barbecue that they're selling is probably human meat as well.
Oh,
at the barbecue place.
The gas.
Yeah, the gas station.
That is
fun fact.
Absolutely about that. Human.
Yeah,
yeah. Because there's a shot that like a reaction shot or like a shot from what's her name's perspective, like the survivor.
Sally.
Sally, right? So there's a shot where she's looking and she's waiting for the old man to come back with the car, and there's like a long take at all the meat just stewing in that fire, and I was like, I knew then. Yeah, that's definitely a human meat going around.
They really lay on a lot of these little things in the remake too. I think that the kids in the van are a little privileged. They all get to go down on this road trip together. They're all doing their thing. They lean on that in the remake by making them, the whole reason they're there is because they're on their way to a Leonard Skinner concert. And it's just like this. They're they don't listen when the guy says, "Oh, you don't need to go messing around there." They're making fun of the old dilapidated house. They're just like, you could tell that they're from a bit of a different world than them, and they're coming in and they're invading and they're not adhering. They're not respecting the people who are there, and then they suffer the consequences. So I think ultimately what this movie is about is just like respecting the people who don't really get a lot of respect. Workers and hillbillies and things
blue
like
collar
that.
people.
Really blue collar people.
Yeah.
And you could tell they're all, obviously it's part of their tropes because they're like the villains, but they're mentally ill. You could definitely tell they have some issues and whatnot. Leatherface especially, obviously.
Yeah.
He doesn't even speak.
So
he just makes noises. He's like a child.
My God, that was another thing that really like skied me out. It's like all the constant animal noises, like when they first reach the house and you hear something that I guess would be the chicken, but there's other like yelping, there's other like always some kind of crying, and also
you can't tell if it's Leatherface or like some animals that are around.
And that was so unnerving. A lot of this movie was just purely that, like, unnerving, uneasy. I was not comfortable watching this movie whatsoever, despite the fact that there's not much violence, on-screen violence.
Yeah, 100%. But also,
I'm sorry. I'm looking now. I have that in my notes. Very unnerving, very uneasy. Animal sounds, whimpering. Hate that shit.
It definitely gives a good soundscape, and even like the tones at the beginning and that happen through them, like the and all those like the guy who made all those sounds like still to this day won't reveal how he did those. Like that weird like camera that goes along with like the camera flash at the beginning. Like there's no I don't know what that is, but it just gets me to my core, goosebumps. You know. There's such a good soundscape in this movie. It's
more or less the same sound like at the end of the movie, like right when it cuts to black after.
And there's little kind of variations of that through it, like especially as people get killed or when Leatherface appears.
Speaking of getting killed, that first.
Ooh, where he opens the door and whack,
God. And he's just like shaking, like just.
Oh my God!
Oh my God! Yeah, like that was. I was taking notes, about the cinematography. I was like, oh, wow, this looks really beautifully shot. He's standing in the doorway, blah, blah, blah. Ooh, look at that red room over there. What's going on there? And then all of a sudden, it's like, damn, like, out of nowhere, Leatherface just knocks him on the head. And then just that shot of, like, the shutting the door. Mm-hmm. Oh, my God. That was awesome. That was, I don't know. I was speechless.
And I love any shot where he just appears out of nowhere. I love when he comes to kill Franklin in the dark and he just boom, he's just there. There's so many great like they're able to achieve so much like really gorgeous work through like some really scary moments and like even the shot of like when they're going around the totem in the beginning or like of the armadillo.
Right, the dead one on the road,
even that like wide shot of like the hitchhiker like trying to get into the van.
The Little Miss Sunshine shot.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it looked like.
Oh my God. Even like the meat hook. It's like there's all like so many great little like camera angles that are partially like I think like meant to be, and also partially because a lot of it is in claustrophobic spaces, so you just kind of figure out where you're gonna stick the camera.
No, there was and this is like a low budget like shoestring kind of production.
In that van, when they were shooting that scene with the hitchhiker, there were 9 people in that van altogether between the actors and the crew, and it was more than 100 degrees outside in a fully all the windows shut van with everybody breathing and their body heat together. I listened to Gunnar Hansen's autobiography through the like an audiobook of him reading it, which is almost like was like basically like it felt like a 20-hour interview. And he said he obviously he wasn't in the van for that, but he was around on the set for that, and he said that was like one of the more brutal times. Yeah. And then another fun fact, when he's chasing Sally and they get to the house and he cuts the door down, that whole sequence.
Right.
Everybody there, crew and cast, stoned. Because somebody brought pot brownies and didn't tell them they were pot brownies, and everybody ate them.
Oh my God!
And there was one door; they had no replacement door.
Oh my
God! If he fucked that up, that would have been it.
So wait, as he was chopping it up,
he
was stoned.
Yeah, he was just like pot brownie stoned.
Dear God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had all of 2 experiences with them, and if it was anything like the first experience, that scene would just not have happened.
Yeah.
Did I say that on air? I said that on air.
Oops.
Whoops.
And you get a guy, high running around with a chainsaw with a real chain on it. You got to cut down that door for reals.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
There's just a lot of little moments like that. Like this to me, when I think of an indie film, I think of this before I even think of Halloween, which is where a lot of people go to, because this is so like maybe 9 people, 9 people as crew at any moment. And that's it. That's all they have working for it.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because, Halloween, is definitely one of the few horror movies I ever really watched and actually loved. Like I love that movie. And that's typically what I think of when I think of low budget movies, especially low budget horror movies. I didn't realize that this was going to be in the same vein. Like this is definitely in my top favorite movies. I don't know.
Really? It's like my 4th favorite movie of all time. I love this fucking movie.
Definitely in terms of horror movies, but maybe even I'll have to reevaluate that. I don't really have a set list, but this is definitely up there. And I don't know. I think there's a certain kind of, and excuse me for saying this, but kind of magic that comes from doing a low budget horror movie.
And it's so short. It gets in and it gets out.
Yeah,
it's like only 83 minutes or something like that, and it even feels shorter than that.
Yeah, I started playing it. It's an hour and 27 minutes or something. And I was like, damn, I could watch this twice tonight.
You know who's a huge fan of this film?
Who's that?
Steven Spielberg.
Yeah,
Spielberg hired Tobe Hooper for Poltergeist based on this movie and its success. And Steven Spielberg, like any chance he'll get, will say how much he loves Texas Chainsaw. But that shot where she's sitting on the swing before going into the house to check on her boyfriend?
Yes, another great low angle there.
That shot, Steven Spielberg, that's one of his favorite shots in any movie of all time. And that was a very hard shot to get at the time because getting the camera under there and they were basically they had like 2 or 3 like pieces of like the dolly track, and they were basically having people off camera like take them from behind and bring them to the front to move it forward.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Oh
as
my
they move
God.
the camera.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. There's so many little things like that. Like, the bones in the house are all real human bones.
Okay.
Because at the time it was cheaper to get real skeletons from India than it was to cast molds of fake bones.
I wouldn't mess around with any of that.
Yeah, so like all those like human bones are like real, like just people.
Wow.
Yeah. You could still get them from India too. It's just like now it's like really illegal here.
Yeah, and I have no interest in getting.
In case you wanted a real skeleton?
Yeah. Thank you for letting me know that.
Yeah.
Is that the dark web I have to go to get it?
No, I don't know. You just got to know the right
just
guy,
go to
I
eBay?
guess. Yeah, go to eBay, look up skeletons from India.
Yeah.
And then, you get them.
I was curious if we could touch on a little bit of the grandpa, because that was really, just freaky. Like, what was that all about? I mean, you have
That's
a
like
lot
a
of
20-year-old guy in a suit, actually.
yeah.
Yeah, that's like a younger dude.
Is there like any rhyme or reason like why like that's happening? Because
Well,
that was freaky. And
What,
it's talking
specifically
about,
with Sally, or just the whole thing?
like, why is he there? Like, what's
Well,
the
That's their grandpa.
yeah.
Yeah, and like you see, the grandma is dead up
Right.
there. And that that gets me talking about some interesting like gender politics. And this is a pretty sexless movie if you haven't noticed. Like
As in like intercourse.
like intercourse and
Or, like,
sexuality, even
sexuality.
like male gaze.
There
you
was
know,
one
like,
shot though.
that butt shot too
Right.
is a big one.
There was that one.
Yeah,
I
but-
didn't. Yeah, I was thinking though too that there was going to be more, because usually like slasher movies are kind of known for that stuff. But yeah, no, it definitely is. It's relatively sexless.
Yeah, and even like you see, like they're all like, it's just a family of men, and Leatherface is taking a lot of the like female duties. Out of the 3 masks that he wears, 2 of them are women. There's the old woman mask and then the pretty lady mask.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's setting the table, and he's kind of like, they're creating false matriarchs.
Yeah,
like false. Yeah. And it's a really interesting gender play within that family that I think adds a level to like when you're trying to analyze the film.
Definitely.
Yeah, they're really ultimately just a family trying to make do in every way with like horrible economic conditions, and like of course, like I'm not sitting here condoning like murder and cannibalism, but I'm just saying that there's a certain, at the root of it, a sympathy that you have to have.
You see what
for them.
capitalism does? It makes
Yeah, that's
cannibals.
basically is what they're trying to say with that. This movie, came out after Watergate and after the Vietnam War. I'm pretty sure after the Kent State riots too. It had to be, right? Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
74?
our producer
Yeah.
is saying, yeah.
Producer, he's
Yeah.
giving the thumbs up. Great. Yeah.
So you look at like all the dark things that were happening in the late 60s, early 70s, and they culminate in films like this.
Well, yeah.
And
I'm forgetting my history. That definitely makes sense now. I see that.
also like the gas crisis too, the Jimmy Carter gas crisis of the 70s that had already happened.
Don't we like Jimmy Carter?
Do we have to like Democrats?
We don't have to.
I don't have to like either, really.
What, he had a peanut farm?
Yeah.
Okay, I like him for that.
Yeah, I like peanuts.
Yeah, peanuts are good.
But yeah, Leatherface is really like, he takes on the role of like, he is the killer. He is like the mother and the
Right.
woman. He's the child because they're all like mistreating him, and he's very childlike. And Gunnar Hansen, I think, even like he took a lot of the Leatherface behavior like from like firsthand experiences with like special needs kids.
Okay.
Too. Like that's where he got a lot of his inspiration from.
Yeah.
So there's like a real dynamic to Leatherface for just kind of a guy in like a human mask.
Yeah, there was a lot more like humanizing elements to him that like you don't get out of like the Boogeyman or Michael Myers or maybe Freddy like pre-remake where they give him that whole backstory and all that, like a little too much. And that's one thing too, is that like I don't think to go back on the noises he makes, I feel like there was one part, I should have written it down, that he actually said something. Yeah, I feel like he
No, it's all just noises.
really.
Yeah.
I have to go rewatch. I do really want to rewatch this if you will allow me to like borrow this again one time.
And to I guess to plug something that definitely doesn't pay me for this plug, but
Yeah.
you can watch this film streaming on Shudder.
That's right.
Yeah.
Folks. Shudder.
A great horror streaming service that I'm only plugging because more people should see the movies that are on there because they are actually pretty fantastic. And it's the best way. You can basically get a very, very good horror education for $5 a month, which is a lot cheaper than any kind of fucking college class that you could take.
Jeez, what a heck of a plug. They're by no means endorsing us.
I wish.
Whatsoever.
I wish.
They
endorse all
welcome
my
to
favorite
it.
podcasts too. So
we're totally welcome to it.
yeah. But another funny thing is people can't decide on what the name of this family is. Some people say it's Sawyer, and there's some people who say it's Drayton. Some people say it's Slaughter, and they change the name. Basically, every sequel to Texas Chainsaw is kind of a remake.
That's kind of cool.
And they change all different things, little things, family dynamic things.
I like that though.
And it's a pretty interesting thing. There's and it kind of the namelessness kind of adds to it. You know what I mean? Like you don't need to define.
Literally Hitchhiker.
Yeah, you don't need to define any of these characters. It's what they represent. You know what I mean? And I think that is an unintentional great thing.
And where did Leatherface come from? Because that's not his name in the movie.
No, the original title for the script was Leatherface,
okay.
and they don't say Leatherface in the movie, but in the advertising.
I didn't even see the credits. Honestly, I should have checked on that.
I think he might be credited as Leatherface. Yeah.
Okay.
But they wound up not naming a movie Leatherface until the third one, which is Leatherface: The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3.
Mm-hmm.
But he is inspired. That's probably where the most Ed Gein is inspired, is that in the house, because Ed Gein wore, suits of women's skin, and Ed Gein made furniture and wallets from human skin and bones and things like that. And that's really where the influence is with Ed Gein. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing I really wanted to talk about some more was just the sheer extent of damage that Sally has experienced. Like you said that she might even be worse off than the ones that are dead.
Yeah.
Which is a thought that I came across too. Was if I was in this situation, I would just let him, freaking hack my head off. At least it'd be over at that point rather than get tortured. But yeah, no, the dinner scene, if you want to call it that. There were so many quick cuts of close-ups of her face.
Yeah.
A lot of Dutch angles.
Her eyes.
Yeah, her very, very green eyes. You could see the very close up on the red veins in the whites of her eyes.
Yeah, her eyes blinking and
yeah.
crying,
There was one shot of her eye welling up with tears. Mm-hmm. Oh man, yeah, it's disheartening. And then especially at the end, when she's just laughing like a maniac. You really just see how much trauma this girl has gone through this whole time. And I didn't know that there was going to be a survivor. I figured trope wise that there would be.
Yeah.
But the scroll, I thought it maybe I heard it wrong. I thought it
just said it.
Her and her brother, right, especially for Sally and Franklin.
Yeah.
Which, to be honest, I don't see why they're any special. Maybe her,
Sally, yeah,
because she survives.
Yeah.
But
But to add to that dinner scene thing, even the cook guy who runs the barbecue place, he even says she's let me go. She says along the lines of stop it or let me go or something.
Yeah.
And he says can't be helped, young lady. And that adds to the whole they're doing it, they're surviving. This is how they have to survive. They turn to brutality because the world has been brutal to them.
They kind of do get pleasure out of it though. When she's screaming and they start making those I don't know wailing
noise,
sounds.
And they're screaming back at her.
Yeah.
I love that in horror movies. I don't know if that starts there. I'm pretty sure that starts there.
Making fun of
that whole oh, you're screaming, so I'm gonna scream back because you're not getting out of this. Nobody can hear you.
Right.
I love that. I love just that dire feeling of I don't even care if you yell. I'll yell too. Let's go. Yeah.
That's a great shot too. Just all three of them at the table from her perspective.
That hitchhiker does that role so well.
Yeah, man.
So I think more than anybody else, that is the acting job of the whole thing.
Yeah, he was freaking amazing. Who did I think? What's his name? Geez, the guy from Patterson, also in Star Wars.
Oh, Adam Driver.
There he is. Looks a lot like him.
Yeah,
reminded me a lot of him.
They do an interesting thing with his character. They call him Chop Top in the sequel, and Bill Moseley plays him. If you've seen Devil's Rejects or House of a Thousand Corpses.
No, but this did remind me of Devil's Rejects.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of. Texas is probably Rob Zombie's biggest influence on anything he does, save for Lords of Salem.
Especially the fact that there's a scene at a dinner table or a dinner table.
Yeah,
meal. Yeah. But okay, so wait, so Hitchhiker is in the sequel?
Well, yeah, they change it like a bit. Like I said, like every movie is kind of like a reboot.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the hitchhiker is turned into Chop Top. He's kind of like a psychedelic guy, but he's got like a plate in his head, and they did some really interesting work with that character. And I love Leatherface as like the icon for this, but like what they do between the first and second movies.
Yeah.
And I used to hate the second movie. I used to be so protective of this one that like I would go, why would you make it so funny and so stupid? But like now I've kind of like lightened up as like a human being, I guess, and like I've learned to really love it and love everything that they did with the sequel.
I think we definitely should do an episode on that.
Oh yeah, we got to definitely do it. It's canon films, and I love like they're just ridiculous, like Masters of the Universe and stuff like that.
Yeah. If we have to either record or I don't know or what, because I'm gonna end up watching more of this. I'm very much invested in this series now.
Oh yeah. No, this is definitely the highlight. I would recommend the remake. I think it's the best of like the 2000s horror remakes.
The Jessica Biel one?
Jessica Biel, yeah, and Eric Balfour. I definitely think the one thing that it definitely changes a lot from this one. I think the one thing it's missing is it doesn't look gritty enough. It's a little polished. It's a little Hollywood. But it's a great film nonetheless. And a great Arlie Ermey performance, from...
Arlie Ermey, Jesus.
Full Metal Jacket?
Yeah, there it is.
A great performance by him. It's a great movie, and they definitely take it in a lot of different places that this movie doesn't. It's longer, it's more expanded, but this movie is so impactful. It basically created a subgenre. It created like the backwoods hippie horror, backwoods.
There it is.
Backwoods hillbilly horror. And I mean, I mentioned 10,000 10,000 Maniacs I mentioned before, the Herschel Gordon Lewis film, and that definitely has like a bit of like like this has a bit of that in it. But like when you look at the films that came out past this, like besides the sequels and reboots and stuff that they did within Texas Chainsaw, you've got everything from like schlock like Hollywood chainsaw hookers to like Motel Hell, which I love. But like it definitely sparked like this whole new well that you can go to for horror films that lasted through the 70s and 80s and 90s. Even today, look at stuff like Wrong Turn. They're still making Wrong Turn movies, and that's got so much Texas in it.
What about The Hills Have Eyes?
Yeah, that came out after this too, and I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that came out after this too, and I don't know if that would have a direct. I'm sure that there's definitely some like inspiration in there. But between those two movies, definitely like added to like the backwoods, like you've invaded our area. That movie has a lot of implications about like the same things that this does, like the wastes of society and what they're gonna do when you treat them like wastes.
Yeah. Right on. Fight the power. Yeah. Eat the rich.
Yeah.
Maybe not these. I mean, I guess maybe they are privileged.
Eat Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
Eat Elon Musk.
Look, Elon Musk, let's not get into that. At least he's got a...
Me and Taylor just gave each other a hard look.
He's got a rocket ship, right? He's got the Tesla. That's a cool thing. Is he paying his people fairly? I don't know anything about that. Everyone knows that Jeff Bezos is a terrible person because of the way he treats his people.
Did you see that Onion article today?
No, I didn't.
That they put out. This is going to be a great segue into the next thing I say.
Okay, cool.
But they put out an Onion article that was like Amazon worker fired for taking unauthorized breath. But that leads me to a really funny. I guess I'm going to end my portion of this discussion on a meme, an old meme,
all episodes should end this way.
Amazon review about this movie that basically said it gave it a 1 star.
Okay.
Because it's called Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and only one person gets killed with a chainsaw, and it's like a long review where somebody's like very upset about that.
Yeah. Okay. Only one. That's true. Yeah. I was thinking, Franklin. Franklin's the only one that literally gets killed.
Everyone else gets killed with the sledgehammer.
Right.
Or at least partially by the sledgehammer.
Kirk gets killed with the sledgehammer, and then he gets chopped up with the chainsaw.
Yeah, and then the girl, she gets. No, she doesn't. She just gets hooked.
She just gets hooked on there, and
then the other guy gets hit with the thing too.
Yeah, Jerry.
Yeah.
So good point. And does a massacre count if it's only like 4 people?
Hey, listen, let's just let it be.
Sounds a lot like the what is it? The Boston Massacre? No, not the most recent one. What is that one called? The historical one.
St. Valentine's Day Massacre?
Not St. Valentine's Day. Jesus, I went to school in Boston. We all freaking graduated high school at least. How do we not know this? The one about the redcoats when they killed all the protesters in Boston.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
Is that called the Boston Massacre?
It's called the Boston Massacre.
All right, so it's the Boston Massacre. I mean, I was thinking more along the lines of the one that was done on the during the marathon. I didn't want anybody to get confused with that. Does that count as a massacre? I don't know. Don't kill people that are at a freaking marathon. Just eat the rich.
Yep.
That's communism for you. That's communism, baby.
So did you have anything else you wanted to add about this film?
I'm definitely a fan. I think that's pretty much it, and it does warm my heart to have another cool slasher icon in my pocket here, because I love Jason, I love Michael Myers, and I love Freddy, and I think this pretty much just seals the deal. Am I missing any? I mean, there are other like B movie kind of ones,
Chucky,
right?
and
Chucky,
like
I don't
that.
ever want to.
No, I'm not afraid of him. I just dislike those films.
So maybe we should watch it then.
Well, at least watch the first one. It's directed by the same guy as who did Fright Night, which you loved. You don't go back and listen to that one. Just know that he loved it.
Yeah, go ahead and assume that I love that one, even though by the end of that episode, I
At least form an
around,
appreciation.
Yeah. But I know that end all be all of this is just, man, I really enjoyed it. So yeah, let's move on to the next one.
Oh, so is it time to reveal that?
I think it is.
Okay, so we're back to my pick for next week. And in honor of our 5th episode, making it to 5, we are going to be doing the film that is the namesake of this podcast. We are doing Clive Barker's fucking Hellraiser.
Is that the official title?
Fucking Hellraiser?
Yeah.
It's my official title for it.
Okay, because I remember seeing it just as Hellraiser.
Yeah, well, they censor it for the kids.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, Hellraiser.
Yeah. So expect that from the next episode. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to this show and to follow us on all our social media. We are on Twitter at good_suffering. We are on Instagram at Good Suffering Podcast. And we are on Facebook at facebook.com/goodsufferingpod. And don't forget to leave us a review wherever you are listening to this too.
Yeah, give us 5 stars.
Hopefully.
Leave a comment.
Yeah. Tell your friends.
Tell your friends. Tell your pastors.
Tell your neighbors.
Tell your dental hygienists.
Yeah. But thank you so much, and we will see you next time on Good Suffering.